This week on the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up, Neil Bisson, a retired Canadian Security Intelligence Service intelligence officer and director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network, examines a series of stories that highlight the growing tension between national security, political polarization, hybrid warfare, and the evolving nature of espionage in the digital age. This week's episode begins in Canada, where proposed lawful access legislation is once again raising difficult questions about encryption, privacy rights, government surveillance powers, and the oversight mechanisms needed to maintain public trust. As intelligence and law enforcement agencies confront increasingly encrypted threat environments, we then head to Quebec, where comments were made by Parti Québécois leader Paul St. Pierre Plamondon regarding possible federal surveillance reignite discussions surrounding intelligence oversight, political rhetoric, and the historical legacy of intelligence operations in Canada following the October crisis and the creation of CSIS. From there, the focus shifts westward as CSIS Director Dan Rogers warns that any future Alberta separation referendum would likely become a prime target for foreign interference, online disinformation campaigns, and hostile influence operations seeking to exploit political division inside Canada. The episode then moves to Europe, where Poland's internal security service is warning that Russia is evolving its hybrid warfare strategy by moving away from disposable online recruits and increasingly relying on organized criminal networks, sabotage cells, and more professional covert operatives to destabilize NATO countries. Returning to Canada, we examine the renewed debate surrounding Tahawwur Rana, who was involved in the Mumbai attacks, and whether individuals connected to terrorism should retain Canadian citizenship protections, including allegations that Rana may have obtained his Canadian citizenship through deliberate deception during the application process. And finally, we head to the United States, where the FBI is offering a substantial reward for information leading to the capture of former U.S. counterintelligence specialist Monica Witt. She is accused of defecting to Iran and assisting Iranian intelligence services, another reminder of the continuing danger posed by insider threats within intelligence and national security communities. Are you ready? Let's go.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Neil Bisson, a retired intelligence officer with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. Every week I take news stories concerning national security, espionage, sabotage, foreign interference, and terrorism, and break them down to provide you with the insights, analysis, and intelligence you need to understand how the shadowy world of spies affects your career, your country, and your safety. It's been a busy week, from accusations by the Parti Québécois of CSIS spying on them to former U.S. intelligence officers being accused of spying for Iran. There's a lot to discuss, so let's dive in. For our first segment this week, we start with a story concerning Canada's ongoing struggle to balance national security, law enforcement investigations, and privacy rights of Canadians in the digital age. A recent article from the Globe and Mail highlights concerns raised by the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency, or NSIRA, regarding proposed lawful access legislation that would expand the ability of law enforcement and intelligence agencies to compel assistance from technology and telecommunication companies. The proposed legislation is intended to modernize investigative powers as more criminal and national security threats move into encrypted digital environments. However, NSIRA is now warning that a stronger oversight and accountability mechanism may be necessary before such powers are expanded. This story highlights the growing challenge facing democratic governments around the world. How do intelligence and law enforcement agencies investigate legitimate national security threats in an increasingly encrypted world, while still protecting privacy rights and maintaining public trust? According to the article, the proposed lawful access framework would require service providers to maintain technical capabilities allowing them to comply with lawful warrants and production orders. Supporters of the legislation argue these capabilities are essential because hostile foreign intelligence services, terrorist organizations, organized crime groups, ransomware actors, and extremist networks increasingly rely on encrypted communication to coordinate their activities. From an intelligence perspective, this is a very real threat. Over the last couple of years, we've discussed numerous stories on the podcast involving cyber espionage, foreign interference, transnational repression, terrorism, and online radicalization. In many of those cases, investigators are dealing with actors who deliberately exploit encrypted platforms because they know democratic governments face legal and constitutional limits regarding surveillance and interception. Whether it's China conducting cyber espionage operations, Russia engaging in sabotage and hybrid warfare activities, or extremist groups radicalizing youth online, encrypted ecosystems have become a significant operational challenge for intelligence and law enforcement agencies. At the same time, critics of lawful access legislation warn that expanding government access capabilities could weaken privacy protections and create vulnerabilities that hostile actors themselves could eventually exploit. And this is where the debate becomes extremely complicated. Because while governments argue they need lawful access to investigate serious threats, cybersecurity experts warn that creating exceptional access mechanisms or technical backdoors could unintentionally undermine the very systems designed to protect citizens, businesses, and government infrastructure. In intelligence work, vulnerabilities rarely remain exclusive forever. If a capability exists, adversaries will eventually attempt to exploit it. This is not the first time that Canada has faced controversy surrounding lawful access legislation. Many Canadians will remember earlier debates surrounding Bill C-30 and previous lawful access proposals that critics described as overly intrusive or lacking sufficient oversight. In many ways, the latest debate is simply the next evolution of a discussion Canada has been having for nearly 2 decades. The challenge for governments is that technology continues to evolve faster than legislation. Criminal organizations, foreign intelligence services, and extremist groups rapidly adapt to encrypted technologies, while governments are left trying to modernize investigative powers within democratic and constitutional limits. This issue also connects to a broader discussion we've had previously on the podcast surrounding online harms legislation, foreign interference, AI-enabled surveillance, and cyber vulnerabilities within Canada's digital infrastructure. One of the recurring themes emerging from all of these discussions is the importance of public trust. If Canadians begin to believe intelligence or law enforcement agencies are operating without proper oversight, transparency, or accountability, it risks damaging confidence in democratic institutions themselves. And hostile foreign actors actively exploit those divisions and fears through information, warfare, and disinformation campaigns. What makes this story particularly noteworthy is that the concerns are coming from NCIRA itself. NCIRA is not an activist organization opposed to intelligence collection or law enforcement investigations. Its mandate is to independently review Canada's national security and intelligence activities to ensure that they remain lawful, reasonable, necessary, and proportionate. So when Canada's own national security review body raises concerns about oversight mechanisms attached to expanded law access powers, governments should pay close attention. The debate surrounding encryption and lawful access is also occurring across broader Five Eyes alliance. Countries including the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia have all faced similar controversies involving encryption, digital privacy, and national security investigations. Many intelligence agencies argue they are going dark as threat actors migrate to encrypted platforms, while civilian liberties advocates warn against creating surveillance frameworks that could be abused or exploited in the future. There is no question that intelligence and law enforcement agencies require modern investigative tools to combat terrorism, espionage, cybercrime, organized crime, and foreign interference, and that oversight, transparency, and accountability are essential in democratic societies. However, as encryption, artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, and online influence operations continue evolving, governments will face increasing pressure to modernize investigative powers. By expanding those powers without maintaining strong oversight and public confidence carries risks of its own. Canada's lawful access debate is likely far from over, and as technology continues advancing, the issue will remain one of the defining national security discussions facing democratic governments over the next decade. We stay in Canada for our next segment and head to Quebec, where comments made by Parti Québécois leader Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon are once again drawing attention to the relationship between politics, intelligence, and public trust in democratic institutions. According to reporting from CTV Montreal, Saint-Pierre Plamondon suggested, without providing any evidence, that Ottawa may be spying on the Parti Québécois. The comments were reportedly made in the context of concerns about federal surveillance and political monitoring, although no proof or specific allegations were provided. While the remarks have already sparked political reaction in Quebec, the broader issues raise important questions about how intelligence and national security agencies operate within democratic societies, and how political rhetoric surrounding surveillance can affect public trust in those institutions. From an intelligence perspective, this is a sensitive topic because democratic intelligence services operate under strict legal frameworks that are designed specifically to prevent politically motivated surveillance. In Canada, agencies such as the Canadian Security Intelligence Service operate under legislation that defines what constitutes a threat to the security of Canada and what investigative authorities may lawfully use. Political parties, provincial movements, or separatist organizations are not automatically legitimate intelligence targets simply because they advocate political change. That distinction is extremely important. Historically, however, Quebec nationalism and separatist movements have had complicated relationships with Canadian intelligence and security services. Many Canadians will remember the controversy surrounding the RCMP security service during the 1970s after the aftermath of the October crisis. During that period, illegal break-ins, surveillance activities, and questionable intelligence operations targeting Quebec nationalist movements contributed directly to the eventual creation of CSIS in 1984. One of the primary reasons CSIS was separated from the RCMP was to establish clear legal authorities, stronger oversight, and safeguard against politically motivated intelligence activities. The historical context still influences perceptions today. As per some political figures in Quebec, concerns surrounding federal surveillance remain politically and emotionally charged issues. At the same time, making unsupported claims that Canada's intelligence agencies are spying on political parties creates its own risks. Intelligence and national security agencies rely heavily on public trust in legitimacy in democratic societies. Suggestions of politically motivated surveillance, especially when unsupported by evidence, can undermine confidence in those institutions and fuel broader distrust towards government and democratic processes. This becomes particularly problematic in an era where foreign adversaries actively exploit political polarization and distrust through information operations and disinformation campaigns. The story also connects to broader conversations we've discussed previously on this podcast surrounding foreign interference, online disinformation, lawful access legislation, and public perceptions of intelligence oversight. One recurring theme emerging across democratic countries is that intelligence agencies are increasingly operated in an environment where public suspicion and political narratives can spread rapidly online, sometimes faster than facts themselves. We've seen similar debates emerge in the United States involving the FBI and allegations of politically motivated investigations, as well as in Europe, where intelligence services are frequently accused of both far-right and far-political movements of political interference or surveillance. In Canada, oversight mechanisms surrounding intelligence collections are significantly more robust today than they were during the Cold War or the FLQ era. Organizations like the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency and SARA, as well as the Intelligence Commissioner and Parliamentary Oversight Committees, now exist specifically to ensure intelligence activities remain lawful, proportionate, and accountable. That doesn't mean intelligence agencies should be immune from scrutiny or criticism. Oversight and accountability are essential in democratic societies, but there's a difference between legitimate scrutiny and unsupported allegations that risk politicizing intelligence institutions themselves. What makes this situation particularly interesting is that Saint-Pierre Plamondon reportedly acknowledged he had no evidence supporting that concern. This matters, because intelligence-related allegations can have significant consequences politically and socially, particularly in Quebec, where historical tensions surrounding federal authority and surveillance remain sensitive issues. From my own perspective as a former intelligence officer, intelligence services in democratic countries operate most effectively when they remain politically neutral and focus strictly on legitimate national security threats. The moment intelligence becomes politicized or perceived as politicized, public trust begins to erode. And once that trust erodes, hostile foreign actors can exploit those divisions very effectively. We've already seen countries like Russia and China weaponize narratives involving government surveillance, institutional distrust, and political polarization to weaken democratic cohesion. That's why discussions involving intelligence activities require careful language, evidence, and context. This latest controversy involving the Parti Québécois leader highlights how historical memory, political rhetoric, and national security issues continue to intersect in Canada. While concerns about surveillance and intelligence oversight should always be taken seriously in democratic societies, allegations involving intelligence agencies also carry responsibility. Canada's intelligence framework today is far different from the one that existed during the Cold War and the October crisis era. Modern oversight mechanisms are specifically designed to prevent politically motivated intelligence activity while maintaining accountability and transparency. But in today's information environment, where distrust, conspiracy narratives, and political polarization spread rapidly online, even unsupported allegations can influence public perceptions and confidence in democratic institutions. And that is exactly why intelligence, oversight, and public trust remain so closely connected in modern democracies. We're sticking with the theme of intelligence and politics in Canada, where we turn our attention to Alberta to discuss the title segment of this episode. The director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Dan Rogers, is warning that any future referendum on Alberta's separation would likely become a target of foreign interference and disinformation campaigns. According to reporting from CBC News, Rogers stated that referendum environment surrounding Alberta's sovereignty and separation would be highly vulnerable to amplification, manipulation, and interference from hostile foreign actors. The comments come amid growing concerns surrounding online disinformation campaigns, Alberta separatist narratives, and allegations that foreign actors, including Russia and China, are already attempting to exploit political divisions within Canada. The story highlights a major national security concern increasingly facing democratic countries around the world. Foreign states no longer need to directly attract another country militarily to weaken it. They can instead exploit political polarization, social division, online disinformation, and internal constitutional debates to destabilize democratic societies from within. According to the article, CSIS believes foreign actors could exploit an Alberta referendum environment through online disinformation campaigns, influence operations, and amplification of divisive narratives. This warning should not come as a surprise to anyone who regularly listens to this podcast. Foreign interference operations are specifically designed to target emotionally charged political issues capable of dividing populations and weakening trust in democratic institutions. In constitutional debates, separatist movements, and sovereign discussions are ideal targets for hostile foreign influence campaigns because they naturally generate strong emotional reactions and political polarization. Over the past couple of years, we've repeatedly discussed how Russia, China, and other hostile foreign actors use social media ecosystems, fake online personas, proxy websites, bots, and disinformation campaigns to manipulate public discourse in democratic countries. We've seen this in Brexit, American elections, European separatist movements, anti-NATO narratives, COVID-19 disinformation, and foreign interference investigation here in Canada. What makes the Alberta situation particularly concerning is that researchers are already identifying online amplification campaigns tied to foreign actors surrounding separatist narratives. And once a political issue becomes emotionally polarizing, foreign intelligence services and influence operators often attempt to intensify the division further. The objective is not always to support one side over another. Sometimes the goal is simply to create distrust, instability, anger, and social fragmentation. This story also connects directly to several themes we've discussed repeatedly on the podcast regarding hybrid warfare and modern influence operations. Countries like Russia increasingly view information warfare as a strategic weapon. Modern foreign interference is no longer limited to recurring politicians or stealing classified documents. Instead, hostile states increasingly attempt to manipulate public opinion itself, and democratic societies are particularly vulnerable because open political systems naturally allow free debate, decentralized media ecosystems, and broad public participation online. That openness is a strength of democracy, but it is also a vulnerability that hostile actors actively exploit. Historically, separatist movements and constitutional crises have often attracted foreign interest because they present opportunities to weaken geopolitical rivals without direct military confrontation. We've already seen concerns raised in Europe regarding Russian support or amplification of separatist movements, anti-EU narratives, and extremist political groups. Now Canadian intelligence officials appear increasingly concerned that similar tactics could be directed toward Alberta. This broader concern becomes even more significant given the recent controversies involving Alberta voter information databases, online political activism, and increasing rhetoric surrounding sovereignty and separation. Foreign intelligence services look for environments where distrust already exists because those environments are easier to exploit and amplify. One of the most important aspects of this story is that CSIS is publicly discussing the threat before the referendum process has even begun. This is a significant aspect of this story. Traditionally, intelligence agencies tend to avoid public commentary on hypothetical political scenarios unless they believe there is a credible national security concern emerging. Director Rogers' comments are less about politics and more about vulnerability. Any emotional, divisive political issue, whether it involves separation, immigration, identity politics, or constitutional reform, becomes vulnerable to foreign amplification campaigns once it begins dominating online discourse. And foreign interference today often operates below the threshold of obvious espionage. It may involve anonymous online influence campaigns, AI-generated disinformation, coordinated social media amplification, foreign proxy media outlets, bot networks, false narratives designed to undermine trust in democratic institutions. One of the key realities of modern intelligence work is that foreign interference does not require large numbers of spies operating inside Canada. A relatively small online operation can now reach millions of people and shape political discourse very quickly. The warning from CSIS regarding a potential Alberta referendum demonstrates how foreign interference has evolved into one of the defining national security challenges facing democratic countries. Modern adversaries increasingly target division itself. They exploit polarization, distrust, and emotional charged political issues in an effort to weaken democratic cohesion from within. Whether or not Alberta moves toward a referendum on separation, the broader intelligence concern remains valid. foreign actors will continue looking for opportunities to manipulate political discourse and intensify social division inside democratic societies. And as online ecosystems, artificial intelligence, and disinformation capabilities continue evolving, these influence operations will likely become even more sophisticated and more difficult to detect. This is no longer simply about espionage in the traditional sense. It is about the weaponization of information itself. To help provide an example of our last segment, we head to Poland, where the country's internal security service is warning that Russia is evolving its hybrid warfare strategy across Europe. According to reporting from the Associated Press, Poland's internal security agency, known as the ABW, believes Russia is moving away from relying on low-level disposable recruits towards more professional sabotage and espionage networks. The report suggests Russian intelligence services are increasingly leveraging organized crime figures, individuals with military or law enforcement backgrounds, and more sophisticated covert operatives to conduct acts of sabotage, surveillance, influence operations, and destabilization activities across Europe. This story highlights a growing concern among NATO and European intelligence services. Russia's hybrid warfare campaign against the West is becoming more organized, more dangerous, and potentially more lethal. According to Polish authorities, espionage investigations have surged dramatically since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The ABW reportedly stated that Poland initiated nearly as many espionage investigations in the last 2 years as it has during the previous 3 decades combined. That statistic alone should raise serious concern. From an intelligence perspective, this reflects the growing reality that Russia is no longer conducting solely traditional espionage operations focused on collecting classified information. Instead, Moscow appears increasingly willing to use hybrid warfare tactics designed to destabilize NATO countries politically, economically, psychologically, and socially, all while remaining below the threshold of conventional war. These operations reportedly include sabotage attacks, arson operations, railway disruptions, cyber attacks, GPS interference, influence campaigns, surveillance of military infrastructure, assassination plots, and recruitment of criminal proxies and disposable agents. What makes this latest warning particularly important is Poland's assertion that Russia is shifting towards more professionalized covert networks. Earlier Russian hybrid operations often relied on loosely recruited individuals contacted online through platforms like Telegram. In many cases, the individuals involved reportedly had little understanding they were participating in state-directed sabotage operations. Now, however, Poland believes Russia is increasingly utilizing organized criminal networks and more capable operatives with specialized backgrounds. And frankly, this should not surprise anyone familiar with Russian intelligence doctrine. Historically, Soviet and Russian intelligence services have long maintained relationships with criminal organizations, proxy actors, smugglers, extremist groups, and unofficial operatives to provide plausible deniability for covert activities. The use of intermediaries allow Russia to create operational distance between Moscow and the actual acts of sabotage or disruption. This story connects directly to many of the themes we've discussed repeatedly on this podcast over the last 2 years. We've discussed Russian sabotage operations targeting Europe, suspected GRU involvement in arson attacks and courier depot fires, cyber attacks against NATO countries, undersea cable threats, GPS interference, and hybrid warfare campaigns designed to exhaust Western security services without triggering a direct military response. This latest Polish warning fits squarely into that broader pattern. Poland in particular has become one of Russia's primary targets because of its strategic importance to NATO and its central role in supporting Ukraine. Poland serves as a major logistics hub for Western military aid entering Ukraine and has become one of Europe's most vocal opponents of Russian aggression. As a result, Poland now finds itself operating on the front lines of Russian hybrid warfare campaign against Europe. The broader concern here is that these operations are becoming increasingly normalized. What once would have been viewed as extraordinary covert activity is now becoming part of the regular European security environment. And many of these operations exist intentionally within so-called gray zone tactics, violent or aggressive actions just below the threshold that would traditionally trigger a NATO military response under Article 5. That ambiguity is deliberate. Russia benefits strategically by creating instability, fear, political polarization, economic disruption, and pressure on Western governments while maintaining plausible deniability. One of the most important intelligence lessons from this story is that modern warfare no longer begins with tanks crossing borders. Hybrid warfare allows hostile states to weaken adversaries gradually through sabotage, espionage, cyber operations, influence campaigns, proxy actors, and covert destabilization activities long before a conventional military conflict ever occurs. This evolution should concern Western countries, including Canada, significantly. Professional sabotage networks are far more dangerous than isolated online recruits because they possess operational discipline, tradecraft, technical capabilities, and criminal infrastructure that make them harder to detect and disrupt. This also reinforces the increasingly blurred line between organized crime and hostile state intelligence activity. Foreign intelligence services are increasingly willing to outsource portions of their operations to criminal proxies because criminal groups already possess smuggling routes, false documentation capabilities, money laundering infrastructure, and networks that can support covert activity. We are seeing more and more overlap between espionage, sabotage, organized crime, and cyber operations. And that convergence is reshaping the modern security environment. Poland's latest warning demonstrates that Russia's hybrid warfare campaign against Europe is continuing to evolve. What began largely as cyber operations, disinformation campaigns, and isolated sabotage incidents now appears to be shifting towards more organized and professional covert networks. For NATO countries, this creates a serious long-term security challenge because hybrid warfare is specifically designed to create instability without triggering open conflict. And as Russia continues testing the limits of Western responses, European intelligence and security services will likely face increasing pressure to detect, disrupt, and counter these covert activities before they escalate further. This is no longer simply a question of espionage, it's an ongoing shadow conflict unfolding across Europe in real time. For those concerned about sabotage and proxy operations in modern intelligence, I teach an online course at the University of Ottawa's Professional Development Institute. The next class is in October and registration is available now. I'll leave a link in the show notes and the transcripts. In this next segment, we return to Canada in the case of Tahawwur Rana, the Canadian citizen convicted in connection to the 2008 Mumbai terrorist attacks. Renewing the debate over whether Canada should have the ability to revoke citizenship from individuals involved in terrorism. According to the reporting from the Global News, the discussion has resurfaced following Rana's extradition to India, where authorities continue pursuing prosecution connected to the deadly Mumbai attacks carried out by Lashkar-e-Taiba militants. The story is once again raising difficult questions surrounding citizenship, national security, terrorism, and the limits of Canada's legal system when dealing with individuals accused or convicted of participating in terrorist act. This is a debate Canada has struggled with for decades. Should citizenship remain absolute regardless of terrorist involvement, or should participation in terrorism potentially result in the loss of citizenship privileges? Rana has long been a controversial figure in Canadian and international counterterrorism discussions. Originally born in Pakistan before obtaining Canadian citizenship, Rana was convicted in the United States for supporting a terrorist plot connected to Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Mumbai attacks that killed more than 170 people in 2008. Lashkar-e-Taiba, or LET, is a Pakistani-based Islamist extremist organization responsible for numerous terrorist attacks, including the 2008 Mumbai attacks, and has been linked by Western intelligence agencies of maintaining historical ties and support network linked to elements within Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, or ISI. The Mumbai attacks remain one of the most significant terrorist incidents of the modern era. The coordinated attacks targeted hotels, transportation hubs, restaurants, and public spaces across Mumbai, and demonstrated how relatively small terrorist teams could create mass casualties, global media attention, and geopolitical instability through highly coordinated urban attacks. From an intelligence perspective, the Mumbai attacks fundamentally changed how many intelligence and security agencies view transnational terrorism and urban assault tactics. The operation demonstrated extensive pre-attack surveillance, international logistics support, communications coordination, and links between terrorist actors operating across multiple countries. It has also highlighted the role of facilitators and support networks operating far from the attack location itself. That broader support structure is part of what makes Rana's case so significant internationally. The current debate in Canada focuses less on operational details of the attacks themselves and more on whether individuals connected to terrorism should retain citizenship protections. Supporters of citizenship revocation argue that participating in terrorism represents such a fundamental betrayal of the democratic society that citizenship should no longer be guaranteed. Critics, however, warn that revoking citizenship creates a dangerous two-tier citizenship system where some Canadians possess more secure citizenship rights than others, particularly dual citizens. This is not the first time Canada has debated citizenship revocation in terrorism cases. Many listeners will remember the controversy surrounding the former Conservative government's BC-24, which expanded the government's ability to revoke citizenship for dual nationals convicted of terrorism, espionage, or treason-related offences. That legislation was later repealed by the Liberal government under concerns it violated principles of equity under Canadian law. From a counterterrorism perspective, governments understandably want mechanisms to address individuals involved in mass casualty terrorism or hostile foreign activities. But democratic governments must also balance national security concerns against constitutional protections, due process rights, and international legal obligations. This debate becomes even more complicated because modern terrorism is increasingly transnational. Individuals may hold multiple citizenships, operate across several countries, communicate through global digital platforms, and participate in extremist networks that transcend borders entirely. We've discussed repeatedly on this podcast how extremist organizations, foreign terrorist groups, and ideologically motivated violent extremists exploit globalization, immigration systems, encrypted communications, and international travel to support operations. Cases like Rana's highlight how complicated these realities have become for modern democracies. One of the major intelligence lessons from this story is that counterterrorism is not simply about disrupting attacks. It also involves difficult legal, political, and ethical questions regarding how democratic societies respond after terrorism occurs. Terrorism investigations are often among the most complex national security cases governments face because they involve overlapping issues of intelligence collections, criminal evidence, foreign partnerships, immigration law, diplomacy, and civil liberties. An important aspect of the Rana story that often gets overlooked is the allegation that he had obtained his Canadian citizenship through deliberate misrepresentation. According to the federal court documents referenced in the reporting by the Global News, Canadian authorities allege Rana falsely stated on his citizenship application that he had been residing in Ottawa and Toronto during the qualifying residency period leading up to his citizenship application in 2000. Investigators later concluded that he had actually spent much of that period living and operating businesses in Chicago. Canadian officials allege this constituted serious and deliberate deception, and the federal government is now seeking to revoke his Canadian citizenship through the federal court process. This is significant because Canadian citizenship applications are based on the legal obligation to provide truthful and accurate information to the Canadian government. Under the Canadian Citizenship Act, citizenship can be revoked if it is obtained through fraud, false representation, or knowingly concealing material circumstances. Physical presence and residency requirements are a fundamental part of the citizenship process, and knowingly misrepresenting where an applicant was living can have serious legal consequences, including revocation of citizenship years later. Importantly, Canadian authorities are not currently attempting to revoke Rana's citizenship because of terrorism-related allegations themselves, but because they allege the citizenship itself was obtained through deception during the application process. The Rana case is also not occurring in isolation and fits within a broader Canadian debate surrounding terrorism, citizenship fraud, and national security. One of the most notable historical examples involves Zachariah Amara, one of the ringleaders of the Toronto 18 terrorist plot. Amara is a dual Canadian-Jordanian citizenship and had his citizenship revoked in 2015 under legislation introduced by the former Conservative government following his terrorism conviction connected to the 2006 terrorist plot in Toronto. However, his citizenship was later restored in 2017 after legislative changes repealed terrorism-related citizenship revocation provisions. From a national security and intelligence perspective, these cases continue to highlight the lack of conviction to enforce the integrity of immigration and citizenship systems. They also reinforce an important reality for intelligence and law enforcement agencies, that individuals connected to extremist or terrorist networks that continue to exploit administrative and legal systems long before they ever come onto the radar of national security investigations, leaving Canada more vulnerable to terrorist entities and organizations. We shift our focus from a Canadian terrorist to an American double agent. The final segment this week brings us to the United States and one of the most dangerous and difficult threats facing intelligence and national security organizations today: the insider threat. According to a recent CBS report, the FBI is now offering a $200,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and prosecution of Monica Witt, a former U.S. Air Force counterintelligence specialist accused of defecting to Iran and providing classified information to the Iranian government. Authorities allege Witt used her extensive intelligence background and access to sensitive information to assist Iranian intelligence services after defecting in 2013. The case is another reminder that some of the greatest threats to national security do not always come from foreign operatives attempting to infiltrate organizations from the outside, but from trusted insiders who allegedly possess access, credibility, and institutional knowledge. From an intelligence perspective, insider threat cases are among the most serious and damaging forms of espionage. Monica Witt reportedly served with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, where she worked in both intelligence and counterintelligence roles. According to U.S. authorities, she later became a government contractor and maintained access to highly sensitive information, including classified programs and the identities of intelligence personnel. The U.S. indictment alleges that after defecting to Iran, Witt assisted Iranian intelligence services in identifying and targeting former colleagues. Investigators also allege that her actions helped Iranian cyber operations conduct online targeting and surveillance activities against U.S. intelligence personnel. What makes insider threat cases so dangerous is that these individuals already possess legitimate access. Security systems, vetting procedures, and protective measures are often designed to stop outside penetration attempts. But when the threat originates from within the organization itself, many traditional safeguards become significantly less effective. This case also demonstrates the importance of behavioral analysis and counterintelligence awareness throughout an individual's career, including after they leave government service. Foreign intelligence services are well aware that former military personnel, contractors, and intelligence officers may retain valuable institutional knowledge long after their employment ends. The Monica Witt case is part of a broader pattern involving increasingly aggressive Iranian intelligence and influence operations around the world. Iranian intelligence services, particularly those linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, have repeatedly been connected to espionage operations, cyber campaigns, transnational repression, surveillance of dissidents abroad, and even assassination plots targeting critics and perceived enemies of the regime. Over the past several years, Western intelligence and law enforcement agencies have increasingly warned about Iran's willingness to use criminal proxies, cyber actors, and covert assets to advance its objectives internationally. According to the FBI, Monica Witt defected to Iran after attending conferences and interacting with individuals connected to the Iranian government. U.S. authorities allege those interactions ultimately led to her collaboration with Iranian intelligence services. The FBI's decision to publicly offer a substantial financial reward years after Witt was first charged demonstrates that American authorities continue to view this case as operationally and symbolically significant. Human sources today are not simply being used to steal documents or provide information. Increasingly, they are helping hostile states identify targets for cyber operations, online surveillance, and influence campaigns. The Monica Witt case serves as a powerful reminder that insider threats remain one of the most complex and dangerous challenges facing intelligence and national security organizations today. This story is not only about espionage, it's about trust, access, vulnerability, and the long-term efforts foreign intelligence services undertake to exploit individuals with valuable knowledge and institutional access. For Canada and allied nations, the lesson is clear. Counterintelligence is not simply about protecting against foreign spies entering our institutions. It is also about identifying vulnerabilities within our organizations before hostile states are able to exploit them. As geographical tensions continue to rise globally, insider threat investigations, counterintelligence awareness, and post-employment security considerations will remain critically important for intelligence services and governments alike. Well, that's it for this week. I want to wish my listeners in Canada a happy Victoria Long Weekend, and my listeners in the United States a happy Memorial Long Weekend. I also want to remind everyone that the Pillar Society, an organization of former intelligence professionals in Canada, will be hosting an upcoming speaker series at the Shankman Center on the 26th of this month. We are fortunate to have Charles Burton, the author of The Beaver and the Dragon, discussing how the Chinese Communist Party systematically exploited Canada's political, economic, academic, and diplomatic vulnerabilities to expand Beijing influence while undermining Canadian sovereignty and national security interests. You can find a link to the tickets in the show notes and the transcript. So until next week, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
That wraps up this week's Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. Thank you for listening. This week's stories highlighted how modern national security threats are no longer confined to traditional espionage or conventional military conflict. From debates surrounding lawful access legislation and encrypted communications, to political narratives involving intelligence oversight here in Canada, to warnings from CSIS about foreign interference targeting domestic political divisions, the modern intelligence environment is becoming increasingly complex, interconnected, and difficult to navigate. What also emerged clearly this week is how hostile states are continuing to evolve their methods. Whether it's Russia professionalizing sabotage and hybrid warfare networks across Europe, Iran allegedly exploiting insider access through long-term cultivation and recruitment, or extremist actors and terrorist facilitators exploiting weaknesses within immigration, citizenship, and legal systems. The common thread is adaptation. Foreign intelligence services, extremist organizations, and hostile actors are constantly studying democratic societies for vulnerabilities, technological vulnerabilities, political vulnerabilities, legal vulnerabilities, and increasingly, human vulnerabilities. And many of these threats now operate below the threshold of traditional conflict. Hybrid warfare, online influence campaigns, encrypted communications, cyber operations, insider threats, and transnational extremist facilitation networks are all reshaping how intelligence and security agencies approach modern threat environments. This week's discussion surrounding Tahawwur Rana also reinforced an uncomfortable but important reality for democratic societies. National security investigations are rarely limited to one single issue. Terrorism, immigration systems, foreign influence, legal protections, citizenship, intelligence collection, and international partnerships often become deeply interconnected in ways that are politically, legally, and operationally difficult to manage. At the same time, stories involving Monica, Witt, and foreign interference concerns inside Canada remind us that intelligence services are ultimately operating in a contest built around trust, influence, manipulation, and access. Modern espionage is no longer simply about stealing classified documents. Increasingly, it is about shaping perceptions, exploiting divisions, leveraging technology, and identifying vulnerabilities inside open democratic systems. Producing the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up requires continuous monitoring of international reporting, intelligence developments, emerging threats, and geopolitical trends to bring you practical analysis and context each week. If you find value in this work, you're encouraged to support the podcast through Buzzsprout. Your support helps ensure independent intelligence and national security analysis remains available to listeners who want to better understand the rapidly changing threat environment affecting Canada and our allies. Don't forget to subscribe, share the episode, and leave a review. It helps more listeners discover the show. And as Neil always reminds us, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.